Hello, and welcome to Decarbonize, the clean energy podcast from Fresh Energy. Fresh Energy is a Minnesota nonprofit working to speed our state's transition to a clean energy economy. My name is Joe Olson. I do communications here at Fresh Energy, and I'm with you today to share a recording of our recent 2022 EV Outlook virtual happy hour with Yuka Kukkonen. Yuka shared with us his top 10 market trends and predictions for the coming year, highlighted a few makes and models, and then took audience questions. And with that, I'll begin the recording. Thank you for tuning in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 2021/22 EV Outlook and Virtual Happy Hour webinar. My name is Joe Olson. I'm the Communications and Engagement Director at Fresh Energy, and today's event is co-hosted between Fresh Energy and Shift to Electric. Gosh, Yuka, is this our third year doing this? Backed by popular demand, I guess.
And I think this is a second on this year already. So we have already did one earlier this year. So
we did. I think we had a sneak peek in April. But yeah, we're back by popular demand, I guess. And you know what? There's still so much to talk about. But first, I do want to take a few moments to do some housekeeping. I know none of us are new to Zoom anymore, but I just want to remind folks that we'll be taking questions at the end of the webinar. But I would encourage you to submit them at any time when they come into your mind. Ideally, please use Zoom's Q&A function. So if you hover on the bottom half of your screen, there's like a little Q&A box. If you click that, you can put in your questions there. That's the spot I'll be checking for questions at the very end. So enter your questions there. And if you see someone else's question that you like, you can always upvote it. There's a like function, and then the best questions rise to the top. And if you use the chat, I can't promise I will see it. So do try to use Q&A if you can. All right, Yuka, next slide, please. Okay, so like I said, lots to cover tonight. We'll be discussing federal investments in EVs and EV infrastructure, the latest and greatest market developments and trends, and then Minnesota's EV landscape, and then of course, the best sellers and contenders for EVs on the market today. And then of course, the Q&A, but the last half hour, I think, is what we planned for that. On to the next slide, please, Yuka. But first, introductions. Welcome to Yuka Kukkonen, who a lot of people on this call probably know. He is the Chief EV Educator with Shift to Electric and EV Consultant with Fresh Energy. Then I also want to welcome my colleague, Justin Fay, who's taking time out of his evening to join us. He's the Lead Director of Public Affairs here at Fresh Energy, and he has his finger on the pulse of what is happening in DC, and he's going to share some of that with us today, right? No pressure, Justin. Thank you both for being here. All right, next slide. Turning the mic over to Justin. He's going to give us the scoop on some major developments coming out of the White House with the American Jobs Plan, the infrastructure bill, and of course, the Build Back Better Act. Justin, it's all you from here.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Joe. It's nice to, well, I can't see you. I was going to say nice to see everybody, but I can't see any of you. It's great to be here. Excited to talk about this topic. There is a lot happening. And what I'm going to try to do today is really just hit highlights. It's not at all my intention or goal to be fully inclusive of everything that's happening in the fairly significant pieces of legislation that have both recently passed and are still pending. We're just going to hit some highlights and talk in a general sense about what it means for electric vehicles. And spoiler alert, it's like the biggest thing ever for electric vehicles. So there's some pretty great stuff that's already happened and hopefully more to come. Yeah, so why don't we just jump right in and we'll talk a little bit about, I'm going to talk in more detail about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is the more commonly known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill. I'm going to focus a lot of my short time on this piece of legislation for the simple reason that it already passed. So the IIJA, or Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, became law, I guess, about 6 weeks ago now. And It's the kind of first of two big pieces of legislation that comprise the bulk of the Biden administration's domestic agenda. The second bill that we'll talk about in a few minutes is called the Build Back Better Act. It has passed the House and is currently being negotiated in the Senate. And we'll talk a little bit about the status and forecast for that and a couple of highlights there. But I want to sort of dig in on the infrastructure bill. So the federal infrastructure bill is the largest investment in public works from the federal government in a generation. It is an expansive bill. It touches kind of every facet of our society. Electric vehicles are a really big part of it, though, and EVs are. The Biden administration has made a significant commitment to electric vehicles, and you can see that reflected in the final legislation. So, a few of the highlights. $7.5 billion for electric vehicle infrastructure. And when we say infrastructure in this context, what we really just mean is charging. And of that money, that's at least $68 million coming to Minnesota for that's light duty electric vehicle charging. Now, to put that in a little bit of context, the previous sort of like largest investment in EV charging in Minnesota was the Volkswagen settlement money. And that, if you remember, several years ago, Volkswagen was caught cheating on their emissions reduction equipment and had agreed to a settlement to basically fund EV development in states around the country. Of Minnesota's portion, the amount that was able to be used for light duty EV charging was about $7 million. So we're talking on the order of a tenfold increase over the previous sort of largest infusion of resources. So it's a really, really big deal. It's going to be, it's going to significantly increase charging penetration around the state and all corners of Minnesota. It's really the first major step towards a national charging network other than Tesla. Tesla has a wonderful network. It's nationwide, and it's great if you own a Tesla. But as we see, the kind of big three auto manufacturers here domestically finally starting to get serious about diversifying and ramping up their EV production. I think Yuka is going to talk about that quite a bit in a little later in the presentation. There's just going to have to be the infrastructure that comes along to match that, and that's what this bill sort of makes the down payment on. Next slide, please. A few other, I want to highlight a couple other kind of transportation and clean transportation things that are included in the bill beyond simply the electric vehicle money. Almost $40 billion for public transit. That's the largest investment in public, single one-time investment in public transit in the history of the United States. Frankly, that says more about our historic underinvestment in transit than it does about this bill, but it's still, by any historical standards, a really big deal. And $818 million of that, at least, will be coming to Minnesota. Beyond that number, though, that could get a lot bigger. The package in the bill includes, in addition to sort of base funding for transit, money for increased funding for competitive grant programs, as well as specific money that's earmarked for the deployment of electric buses. And so that would be on top of the $818 million coming to Minnesota. Particularly when you think about comparing that with other funding streams that the state has available, whether through the state bonding bill or you may have seen in the news, the state has historically large budget surplus. There could be, this could be help grease the wheels for a really significant local or regional set of transit investments. Next slide, please. Some of the other features of the bill that we're pretty excited about at Fresh Energy, $550 million for energy efficiency block grants and $500 million for state energy program. These are really important. Frankly, those numbers could be a lot bigger, and they would barely begin to scratch the surface of the investments that we need to be making in our physical infrastructure, our buildings, and the electric grid. But they're a good start. It's certainly better than zero, and that comes at a really important time in our transition to clean electricity. The Biden administration, in addition to sort of their more general EV policies, has also made battery development and specifically the development of a domestic supply chain for battery production a really high priority. Obviously, that impacts electric vehicles very directly. It is broader than that. That includes battery technology that can be used on grid, so like utility scale electricity storage. There are some pilot projects, actually a really cool one being that already built in Minnesota, one in near Princeton, Minnesota, that's owned by Conexus Energy. It's really cool. But $7 billion specifically in that bill for building out a domestic supply chain for batteries, which is a really big deal and will help jumpstart U.S. from an international competitiveness perspective. And then I always like to talk about this last one on the slide here, $100 million for broadband expansion, which maybe doesn't immediately sound like it's a climate investment or why is an energy group talking about that, but we actually have still thousands of Minnesotans that don't have access to high-speed internet. And some surprisingly large gaps, particularly in rural communities around the state where that service just isn't available. And when you make those investments and you actually provide high-speed, high-quality internet, you also create the ability to work from home, which allows for people to live where they want to live. It reduces commuting times, it lowers vehicle miles traveled, and it is absolutely part of the basket of strategies that we should be using from a clean transportation and climate perspective. Next slide. So I mentioned at the outset that the infrastructure bill was sort of part one of the Biden plan. Part two is called the Build Back Better Act. So that's what the BBB stands for there at the title of that slide. One simple way to think about the Build Back Better Act is the climate provisions include a lot of things that are like what's in the infrastructure bill, except for they're a lot bigger and a lot better. And so the infrastructure bill was sort of let's get money out the door to pay for nuts and bolts things that are relatively less controversial, safe. The Build Back Better bill is, okay, now let's take those same ideas and actually do them at the scale that we need to reach the goals, the climate goals that we have as a society of hopefully getting to net zero by mid-century. For EVs, this didn't get put on the slide, but the kind of flagship policy is tax incentives for electric vehicle sales of up to $12,500 per vehicle. That would be a game changer, particularly in the early part of this decade while folks are, the technology is still, it's not new technology anymore, but folks are maybe still getting used to it. It's maybe not super visible in every part of the country. And so providing that extra incentive at the front end is sort of the thing that's most proven to drive sales. And it's going to and hopefully be able to do that even in parts of the country that maybe haven't been as friendly to electric vehicle deployment from a state and local policy perspective. So the latest status update on the Build Back Better Act is it has passed the US House. The Senate is not going to pass the exact same version of the bill that the House passed. And so there's negotiating is happening as we speak on it. The Senate Majority Leader has claimed that the bill will be out of the Senate by Christmas. I don't think anybody other than him really believes that. So most likely we're looking at sometime in January that negotiations will hopefully come to a head and we'll have a final package come out of the Senate that hopefully the House can support, and then it's off to the president's desk. So that's a lot I went through really fast, but again, it's just a lot happening and it's really, really exciting, and excited to hear what else is happening in the industry from Yuka. So back to you, Joe.
Thanks, Justin, and thanks for being with us tonight. Yuka, I think it's your show from now till the Q&A.
All right. Thank you
ready?
very much. Yeah, hey.
We warmed up the room for you. You're welcome.
You did. Thank you very much. Good job. Thanks, Justin, for sharing your perspectives about that. And thanks, Joe, for opening us this and making such nice slides. Now I have to tell the audience from here on, you'll be looking at my slides, which are not even close to this pretty, but we'll have to live with that. All right. So please use the chat to talk with each other. We use all kinds of funny predictions for next year. I'm going to be taking a little different approach this time than we have done previously. So we'll instead of just going through a ton of different models at the end, I'm going to be talking about 10 different trends that I see right now happening. That doesn't cover all the trends that are happening in the market, but it's just kind of like some of the things that are popping up and that I especially find interesting. So as I said, it doesn't cover everything, but some of the perspectives that I'm bringing. So you can use the chat to kind of talk to each other during this time and put your questions to the Q&A, so we can then talk about all of that at the end. All right, so let's start from the basics here. As most of you know, I'm an automotive engineer by training, and that means that I have to start with technology. And this is the key piece of the whole thing. Is like, why are we even talking about EVs? I've told you this. I've told you this before in this meetings, or webinars, but I'll go back to it again because this is kind of the crucial piece of it. Internal combustion engine is what we've used for 100 years. As many of you know, it's pretty complicated machine, and it has worked well for us. But we're trying to capture the energy that is in chemical form by using small explosions and transforming it that way into mechanical form. And as we know, it's not very efficient to do any kind of energy transition by using small explosions. So we're losing a lot of energy there. Internal combustion engines are between 15 to 25% efficient as they are. So they are not really great in the work that they do. There's a lot of losses, mechanical and especially heat losses. So someone has actually said that internal combustion engines are excellent heaters, and as a side product, we get some propulsion power out of them too, which is a good description of internal combustion engines. The other option that we have is, of course, electric motor, which we have used also 100 years. But the difference with that is that you have only one moving part, the rotor. So the efficiency rates with those, we're talking about 85 to 95% efficient. So it's 4 times more efficient than internal combustion engine. So anyone who starts driving electric drops 75% of their energy consumption overnight, which is huge. It has a huge impact, and that's the whole thing why electric vehicles make so much sense. Now you could ask me, okay, if we have had both of these technologies for the last 100 years, why haven't we moved into EVs already 50 years ago? And the answer to that is batteries. So battery technology was not ready previously, but it has really improved, especially in the last 10 years. If 10 years ago, Volkswagen, for example, would have built their ID.4 battery 10 years ago, it would have cost them over $80,000. Now, this year, it probably cost them only $8,000. So it's a little different thing. That's why manufacturers can make money with building EVs, and that's why we can see longer range EVs coming out all the time. And we'll get back to that later today. But let's look at the market. How has that developed? And first, again, the comparison between US market and European market. If you think about it, look at this slide here, we can see that in that graph, we used to be pretty similar in the sales numbers between Europe in the past. But then in 2019, Europe started to accelerate. 2020, it totally took over off the market there. And we actually have just kind of like backpedaled a little bit here in the US. So what is this? Why is there such a huge difference here? Well, the difference is vehicle availability. And this is again the story that I've told for years and still continue to tell. The biggest limitation for EV sales, it's not charging infrastructure, it's none of that. They might play a role there, but the biggest impact really is the vehicle availability. There's a ton of people who would like to buy an EV right now, but can't because they can't really find the cars and they're not well available, they're not marketing and so forth. In Europe, they put together much more robust emission standards, which required manufacturers really to bring EVs into the market. And when they did that, you can see what happened. Market responded by saying, yes, we want these cars. And that's why Europe right now is growing really fast. And I hope that that's our future too, when we start to get the manufacturers to bring the vehicles to here. We have seen better growth in this year compared to last year here in the US. So the market share of US EV sales, EVs in here is Q2 was 3.6%. So we have doubled the market, which is good, but this is mainly Tesla. So I'll come back to that. Tesla right now leads the market. They are probably like 60 to 70% of the sales of EV sales in the US are Teslas. And that's a challenge that's because the manufacturers, other manufacturers have to, whatever production they can make, they actually have to send most of that to Europe because there's so much demand there. And that's why we are kind of sideshow right now for the manufacturers. But again, hoping that we can change this. How can this change then, or how has this changed in a similar markets? And I take a comparison here to Finland. We can kind of look at what has happened there in last years. In Finland, 2017, they were exactly in the same situation as we were, about 2 to 3% of the market. EVs, that's the green portion of that. And then this year, if you look at the numbers, they are over 30% of the market already. So in last 4 years, the market has grown that fast. And last month, actually, Finland, the EV market share was 38%. So it's amazing. Other European markets, just to give you an idea, Germany, 22% January of this year. Last couple of months, I think they were already 28%. So 6 percentage points just in this year. Sweden is over 50%. Norway is about 90%. So it's amazing really what's happening there. And that's a good thing for us, because what we can then do is we can look at what happens to us in the future. We can just, it's easy to see what the future looks like when you just go to Europe and check out what they're doing there. So that's that. But again, that future will not happen before we start to get cars here. And that's always my challenge with my predictions. It's not so much about the market, it's more about the manufacturers. I can give much better predictions of what would happen in the market if I would know what the manufacturers will do of the availability of the vehicles here. Still, right now, if you look at what McKinsey and Company and other entities are predicting, they're saying that in 2030 our market will be 50% EVs, which makes a lot of sense. I think it will happen again sooner if we start to get the manufacturers provide more models and makes for us. But in any case, that's pretty clear number here. Or everybody's kind of looking at that kind of numbers at least. So in next 9 years, our automotive market is changing a lot. So that's pretty clear to everyone. And the thing here though is that my first trend that I'll be sharing with you is that Tesla will still continue to rule the EV market, at least in the short term, and probably even longer. There's a lot of talk that, hey, other manufacturers are going to be taking over Tesla and Tesla is going to be losing here. And I just don't see that happening. And here is what we've been seeing recently with Tesla and their market share. So this is a US car and light sales by make 12 months 2020, so last year. And Tesla at that point had a 1.8% market share. They were 22nd biggest seller in the US. We go into the 9 months of this year, and Tesla is now 2.0 market share. You can see their market share growth, their percentage change is 65%, and they are now in spot of 21 there. Then we look at the Q3 sales of this year, And you can see that actually their market share now is 2.5%. And now they're in spot 16. They have sold more cars and light-duty trucks in the US in a Q3 than Volkswagen, BMW, and Lexus did, and plenty of other makers too. So that's pretty telling how well they are doing right now. Partly this is because of the manufacturers are struggling with the chip shortage. But if you think about it, Tesla is the most advanced technology-wise of all these manufacturers, and they can still do it. So that's pretty amazing. They don't have the same kind of challenges as some of the others do. But again, this just gives us a good idea. All right, so we've looked at what has happened in the last year, 2 years here. What will happen next year in Tesla? Tesla right now have increased their price of their models, pretty much all of them, at least 10,000 this year, which is amazing. I mean, overall, vehicle prices have increased this year, but Tesla has increased their pricing much more than others. And they are still have right now the shortage on the vehicles is such that you have to wait for the popular models until sometime next year. Some of them till 2023. I think Model X, the next delivery date was 2023 that they said on their website. So at the same time, while they are selling a lot of vehicles, they still have so much more demand. So what will happen in 2022 or early here in just maybe even the end of this year or early next year? Right now, the vehicles that are coming into the market are coming from Fremont, or there's some production also in, or some helping production in well, assembly-wise, Fremont and China. They are the locations where they are building vehicles, and they have about 1 million vehicles a year that they can produce in both of those factories. But the challenge is that they don't have anything in Europe, and that's the challenge, because you have to bring them either from China or from US to Europe. They are opening the Gigafactory Berlin in a month or two here, and then they have a production facility in Europe that is huge. So then they don't have to be manufacturing the vehicles for the European market anymore in the US or Europe or in China. And that helps them a lot. That gives them a lot of production capacity in both of those markets to other things. And then in Europe, they can start to compete much more in that market too. At the same time, there's also going to be a Tesla Gigafactory Austin. So that's going to be opening up in a couple of months here too. So then we have more production capacity also here in US. So now, if you think about it, if Tesla has already ruled the market in the US, even with present capacity limitations, now you don't have to be hauling vehicles to the Europe anymore, and you will be opening a second manufacturing factory here in the US. What does that do to your capacity? It more than doubles the capacity. And then you can start to really sell vehicles in the US. So if they are right now in spot 16, what will be they? Where will they be in next December, a year from now, when we do the next one? It's interesting to see. But here's the first trend that I wanted to share with you. There's an interesting opportunity here that Tesla has with their production capacity increase. So we'll see how that plays out. All right. Want to remind you again about another thing that we have seen in the past is the range is changing. What we used to think about the cars was 100 miles or something like that several years ago. Now we're talking about totally different range nowadays for the cars. So average person in the US drives 37 miles in a day. That's the blue line there. And in our family, when we got our first Nissan Leaf 2012, that had 73 miles of range. That worked well for my wife because she drove about that 35 miles a day, so no problem with that. But of course, it was somewhat limiting. You didn't take that to a trip to Duluth or anything further than that. Nissan Leaf 2018 had already 150 miles of range, and then Nissan Leaf Plus 2019 had 225 miles of range. That's 3 times the range of the best Nissan Leaf from 2012. So that again is because the batteries have become cheaper and their capacity has increased. So manufacturers can actually provide vehicles with better range. We have quite a bit of vehicles that are in 220 to 260 level, then some that are 300 or over even, and then some that are even further than that. And what is happening right now is that many of these manufacturers are also increasing the battery size every year. So now you're starting to see like 15 to 20 miles longer ranges every year. And that's kind of cool to see too, that we still continue to see the range increase. But we are already in a level that last year average range for EVs that were sold in the US was over 250 miles. And I think that's pretty good already. I very rarely drive more than 250 miles a day. So that's why we have already the vehicles that work for people. There's no really, range is not the limitation anymore, especially the same ways that it used to be even 5-6 years ago. And then of course, if you're still concerned about range, you can always go with the plug-in hybrids. So we have plenty of those and some new models too that came into the market this year. You can find all the information about vehicles that are available in the US and in Midwest. Just go to evinfolist.com. You can find the list there. I actually just updated that list today, so it should be pretty well up to date right now. So check it out. All the technical specs and pricing information and everything else there. The vehicles that came into the market this year, and here's a trend number 2. It's a crossover era in automotive industry. Crossovers are over 45% of the market. So they are by far the biggest market segment in general on vehicle sales. And that's why we are seeing also most of the EVs that are coming into market coming into that crossover section. So that's why I would call this crossover era. We'll see where we move from here, but right now that's what people like the best. So we have 3 new sedans this year: Polestar 2, Audi e-tron GT, and Lucid Air. And those are all great sedans. Really good one. Crossovers and SUVs, we have Volkswagen ID4 came to the market, Mustang Mach-E, Volvo XC40 Recharge. Jeep Wrangler 4xe was the first one from Jeep, and they were like, I don't know how well these will sell, and they have been selling really well. So, and they actually are excellent deal too. I made a calculation of those Jeeps. If you do the same comparable internal combustion engine vehicle Jeep, the cheapest one started like 30,000, and this one cost about 50,000. This 4xe. But if you put all the same equipment into the internal combustion engine one than that this 4xe has, you are pretty much the same price. And then you get 7,500 tax credit for the Jeep Wrangler 4xe. So it's much better deal after all. And of course you get a better vehicle. So that's a good example of that. Chevy EUV came to market, Hyundai Tucson plug-in hybrid, Kia Sorento plug-in hybrid, and then Ford Escape PHV also. So not too many vehicles, but there are really some good ones. I would say the top row is excellent. And we'll talk about those a little later. Pickup trucks, we were waiting to see a couple of pickup trucks at least come to market. Really the only one that kind of came was a Rivian R1T, but there's a very limited number, and those most went into their employees so far. So I didn't really list it as coming to the US market yet this year. Then next year, we are expecting more vehicles. We'll see how this plays out. Again, as I said, it's hard for me to say much about the market because this is determined by manufacturers and how much are they going to bring to US and how much they're going to take to Europe and so forth. For sedan section, Mercedes EQS should come early in the year. Same with BMW i4. They are just starting the deliveries in Europe right now, and I would say probably first or second quarter we should see some in the US too. Again, I have no idea how many of these will actually be available in Midwest, or are they just going to be in the coasts? That's to be seen. Crossovers and SUVs, Cadillac Lyriq, full electric one, Jeep Grand Cherokee 4xe, so that they have using the same technology as they used in a Wrangler. Kia EV6 and Hyundai Ioniq 5 are sister models, but they're quite a bit different. Excellent cars both. My brother actually just bought a Kia EV6 in Europe again. They're already available in Europe. They will be available in here next year, but only in select markets. And Minnesota, unfortunately, is not one of those yet. So we are hoping that the Clean Cars Minnesota regulation that went through will change this in the future, so that our Kia and Hyundai dealers can also compete in this sector. Otherwise, it's kind of sad if they don't have anything to sell. Lexus is that's the first plug-in hybrid Lexus that is coming in NX 450h. Nissan Ariya coming later next year. BMW iX, Audi Q4 e-tron, Polestar 3. Actually, they start to manufacture that in US. I'll talk about that a little later. Hyundai Santa Fe plug-in hybrid is just coming to the market. Volvo XC40, XC90 electric, and then even Toyota is hopefully bringing their Beyond Zero, I think it was BZ4X, it should say, and Subaru Solterra and Rivian R1S. And pickup trucks is another segment that actually should happen next year in some ways. We will definitely see GMC Hummer EV in small numbers. Rivian will increase their sales. Ford F-150 and Tesla Cybertruck, very interesting. We'll talk a bit more about those a little later. So I come back to those. All right, reminding everybody about charging. The basic story again is whenever you talk with anyone about charging, remember that majority of the charging happens at home, because home is the most convenient and the most affordable way to power your driving is to really charge it at home. If there's workplace charging available, people will use that, and public charging is much smaller portion of this. Of course, it's still important, because when you're driving a long distances, for example, you need the public charging, but home charging is always the most important place for it. So, okay, so how to charge an EV? Just the basics again here. Every car comes with a level 1 cord set. You can plug it in the normal 120 outlet, and you can start driving. So you don't necessarily have to do anything fancier than that to start with your car. And many people use this for years for their charging, but we are limited by how much power we can pull out of that 120 outlet. So it works well if you drive less than 30 miles a day. If you drive more than 30 miles a day, then have 240 volt level 2 charging station installed. The basic ones of those cost $500 to $600, and it's very simple installation. It's a 3 wires 240 volt connection. Every electrician can do that, no problem. And then the fastest way to charge your car is DC fast charging. These ones are the commercial units that provide much more power, and I'll come back to that a little later again, how I see these changing in next year, what will happen with these. So trend number 3, home charging becomes commodity. First of all, home charging becomes something that right now we've had to do a lot of education on telling people how this whole thing works. It's not that complicated for home charging, especially in single family homes. So this will become something much more simple for people. Utility companies are providing good programs for it. You can go and in some Costco's I hear in the US are actually selling charging stations. You can just go and buy a charging station from Costco. Of course, you can order it online and all of that stuff. But the trend number 3 here is that also we are starting to see that new homes will start to get EV ready. And EV readiness means that they just have to have a 240 volt outlet in the garage. So any times you build a new garage, they should install a 240 volt 50 amp line into the garage, so it's EV ready. That's basically it. That's what needs to be at any new home. If someone would be building a new home and it wouldn't have EV charging in there, I would not buy that home. I'm like, guys, really? You're trying to build something new that should last next 30 years and you didn't think about putting EV charging in here. Doesn't make any sense. But that's a new trend. I think we are starting to be in an education level where people are realizing that this needs to happen. Trend number 4, multi-unit dwellings need to make charging plans and investments. This is the other thing that is really happening right now, and we see it. I speak with multi-unit housing. So especially in with condominiums, their HOA ports weekly here. Last week I think I did 2 or 3 presentations to these entities about EVs and how they can start to do this. Utility companies are going to be providing good programs for this, so that's going to be helpful. But every multi-unit property will need to look into this, especially in the condominiums, because there everybody needs to have an equal thing there, so that if one gets a chance to do it, others should have a chance too. So they have to figure out the plan how to do this now and in the future. But a lot of work is needed in that sector. All right, trend number 5, public charging turns to DC fast charging. What we have been talking in the past has been a lot about when public charging has been quite a bit about level 2, but the importance of level 2 will be becoming smaller all the time, and DC fast charging is going to be the way to go for most of the installations on public area. And there's a plan now with the federal government putting 500. We should have 500,000 fast chargers by 2030. That doesn't mean that all of those will be DC fast charging stations, but most of them definitely will. And how do we know this? Well, it's very easy. You again go to see what the future looks like, go Europe and see what they are doing there, and you realize, okay, that's where it's going. A little bit about the past. This was the first DC fast charging station that was installed in Minnesota, outside of Tesla ones. So this is for everyone. And here's first Nissan Leaf that was plugged into that station, and that of course was my car. This is at the University of Minnesota. Guys give me a hard time and say that really didn't count. You can't get the bragging rights because that station was not powered when you plugged it in. But I'm saying it doesn't matter. I was the first one to plug in, so I get the bragging rights. So that's that. Here's a good example of something that was really, really great in 2013 that wouldn't work at all anymore. You have a single spot, single charging station, no flexibility whatsoever, no redundancy, nothing to support it in a reliability way. So this is not how we should be doing DC fast charging in the future. But it has to be done differently. And I have some pictures from Europe to show what it can look like. Grocery stores will be one location where we see a lot of DC fast charging in the future. Here, for example, we have a couple stations where there's probably a couple more behind those cars. You can actually see there, and most of these will be DC fast charging, some of them level 2s to just provide the flexibility for those, for example, plug-in hybrid owners who don't do that. But these grocery store chains, like in here in Finland, K-Lataus, they have actually just branded it for themselves. They're actually running the whole thing too. So that's what they're gonna do, because this is a differentiator for them. It's actually even not a differentiator anymore in Finland. If you have a bigger grocery store chain, you have to be in business to offer these, because otherwise you're losing one market segment that is not gonna come to your stores. Everybody's doing it already. Gas stations. We will see much more installations in gas stations. This is in Norway. Here's a good example of DC fast charging installation in Norway, in Shell station there. Some of them can be under canopy, which means that you're just pulling a couple of traditional pumps out of there and replacing with the DC fast charging. That's not the first thing to do. I think first we will see more of this, where we will be seeing multiple stations in the same location by the gas station or any place, and that provides us the things that we are right now missing. We are missing the redundancy and reliability. When you have more stations, then you start to have those things going for you, and that's important. So these kind of setups we will see more and more. We'll see them more in the fast foods and other short stop locations. The same way again, multiple stations. There won't be just one. There has to be more. Hotels and parking ramps will put both DC fast charging and also for level 2s. Hotels are a good example of where level 2 works really well. So because you're there overnight. So that's definitely another thing to consider. Trend number, where are we going here? Trend number 6, public charging becomes easier. Plug and charge is a system that is coming to the market. It's kind of doing the same thing as Tesla has had for a long time. So right now, if you go and use DC fast charging station, you either use your cell phone app, or you use an RFID card that you have from some network, or you pay with your credit card. And the challenge is, for example, with credit card readers, is that they're the most unreliable part of these stations. They are not very good, especially when you're using the magnetic reader. They seem to be having the most trouble in outside setups. It's much little better if you are paying with your near field communication part of your card, but it still can be a little challenging. What we will be seeing in near future is that all of the other stations are going to be continuing the same way as Tesla has done, where you can just go to the station, plug the car in, and it recognizes which car this is, and it starts to charging automatically. You don't have to do anything for it, and then it just automatically deducts money from your account based on how much you charge there. But you just plug it in and go. You don't have to do anything to it. This is we have a couple of cars that are already using this one, but there will be more and more that are coming. And why I'm saying this will be coming, because one of the biggest manufacturers, Volkswagen, for example, this week announced that all of their cars will be plug and charge ready next year. So this will happen, and very interested to see how fast this will move and how they will work. It'll be a bit more complicated than Tesla's case, because Tesla again owns the whole system. There's just Tesla's cars that are charging at Tesla's charging station, so they have a much simpler setup. Here you have to have a different kind of public key infrastructure there and ecosystem. You have to have the automakers to work with the charging station operators and so forth. So it's a bit more complicated, but looks very promising. It'll be great when that happens. Trend number 7, power starts flowing back. This is also a very cool thing. We've been waiting for a long time to vehicle to grid setups, and that's coming true. But I see first these vehicle to load or vehicle to home setups coming, and next year is the first year that we start to really see cars providing this. Ford F-150 Lightning has a system where if you buy one of those and you have them install the Ford Charge Station Pro, then at the same time, Sunrun is one of the companies that will do these installations, and they can install an automatic transfer switch that, in a case of grid outage, changes the switch there, and it takes your house off the grid, and then your car can actually set up a grid for your house. So that can power your whole house for 3 to 5 days, I would say, probably, with that battery easily. So that's a very, very good. At the same time, that Ford F-150 Lightning has outlets, normal outlets in the front or in the back there. And for example, in front, I think it has 4 outlets there, and it can provide 2.4 kilowatts from that front, just from that front. In a full system powering the house, it can provide 9.6 kilowatts, which is, for example, way more than I would ever need to run my house in power levels. So that's very, very cool. And again, you can power then anything you want. You go somewhere and you want to power your equipment. You want to have a table saw with you, you set up a table saw, start working with it, just plug it into your car and provide the power from there. And another example there on top right corner is a Kia EV6 and Hyundai Ioniq 5. As I said, those are sister models. Those will be providing an outlet there that you can just plug into that car's charging port, and that can provide you 3.6 kilowatts of power. The car also has inside in the back seat another outlet where you can, if you're sitting in the back seat, you can plug your laptop there to charge, or anything, or if you're driving something, you can just leave your laptop there to charge, or any of your equipment. So that provides us a lot of flexibility. Our cars start to be moving power sources for us, which is great. And the last lower right corner is from Volkswagen, because they announced just recently that all ID branded cars will be vehicle to grid capable starting 2022, so next year. So we start to see quite a bit more of this, which is great development. And if you think about it, if you can buy a car that actually can power your house or provide you power wherever you are, how great of an advantage that is compared to your internal combustion engine car that can't do any of this. All right, trend number 8, pickups are coming. This is really going to be changing many things, and it already has. When years ago, when people were asking me, okay, when do you think the pickups will be coming? And I said, whenever Tesla will announce one. And then when Tesla announced one, then everybody else was following it after that. So that's how the market seemed to be working. Anyways, Tesla won't be the first one probably in the market. Rivian R1T already got that crown, so that happened. Then GMC Hummer should be coming any month now here too, and then Ford F-150 Lightning is probably going to be the third one, and Tesla Cybertruck will be the last of these. All of these cars provide unbelievable amount of power, great towing capacity, like over 10,000 pounds and stuff like that. Just amazing numbers, amazing acceleration, just much more powerful than traditional pickup trucks. So they will be very cool addition. And it's telling when you look at, for example, what kind of success Ford has had with their F-150 Lightning. They have already over 200,000 reservation holders for it. And they stopped taking reservations last week. And people can start to order it next month, I think, in January or February. And they'll start the deliveries before the end of next year. But the challenge is, of course, that they have challenges ramping up the production. It'll take them several years before they could produce 200,000 units. So again, demand is not the problem. The production side is the biggest challenge right now. All right, trend number 9. Small number of EVs will have decent to good availability, and rest of the others will not. And here are some of the EVs that I predict will have the best availability in 2022. I already mentioned Tesla, so Tesla Model 3, Tesla Model Y there. Mustang, Ford Mustang Mach-E will have a decent availability because they are ramping up their production fast. This year, most of the Mustang Mach-E's that were produced actually went to Europe, even though they were produced here. But next year they will have more production, and Ford has announced that they will try to increase the production to over 200,000 units in 2023. This year their production has been under 100,000 or close to it. But I'm assuming we will have better availability next year for Mustang Mach-E. ID4, Volkswagen will start the production in US too for ID4, so that's great. Audi has had a decent availability for their cars, so I'm assuming the same continues. Same with the Porsche Taycan. I don't have a picture of it here, but Porsche Taycan sold its most sold Porsche's car model. It sold more than 911 in the first 9 months in the US. And then Polestar, that is Volvo's sister company, Polestar 2 and also Volvo's XC40 will have a better availability because they will start to produce those in US too. There's also going to be Polestar 3 that will be then a crossover, and that should come into the market before the end of the next year. So those are my predicted vehicles that have the best availability. All of those are great cars. I would just say, if you have a chance, test drive whichever ones you like the best. I'll point out one. For example, we have the only Polestar dealership in Midwest here in Twin Cities. So Borton Volvo has has a Polestar dealership here, so you can go to Golden Valley and go and test drive it there. They actually have some units, which has been amazing how many Polestars we have been getting here. So you can go there, test drive it tomorrow, and you can actually probably drive away with one if you want to. So excellent car. I would highly recommend testing that and the others. All right, and then the trend number 10 that I have here, electrify everything. Electrification is happening in a variety of areas, and they will all support each other. We will see much more electric buses, both school buses and what Metro Transit, for example, uses. We will see much more starting next year. Some, for example, Rivian will be providing the delivery vans into some markets. Right now, they are testing a handful of them. Next year, we'll see much more of them. We will see airplanes, electric ones. They're already using those like two-seaters in some training purposes for people who are just learning how to fly. I might actually consider that some year, just to learn how to fly, because they are now electric. That might be cool. I have to consider that. Anyways, I've seen some videos, people using them. They look really, really good. And then outboard motors, smaller ones and also coming bigger ones there. Four-wheelers are like ATVs and others. My brother has used one of those in his farm for years, loves it. Now, just recently, they've been announcing new ones here, and with much bigger batteries, lithium-ion batteries, great performance, excellent of those. And then, of course, all the lawn equipment that we are using, all the yard work equipment. We have done several webinars about that, and you can check those from our freshenergy.org website, the webinar recordings of that. But there's no reason to buy a small engine anymore for anything that you use around the house. So electrifying everything, and all of these will be supporting each other. So that's that. That was my trend number 10. All right, let's go to Q&A.
Oh, Yuka, I'm gonna put in a few plugs before we dive into the Q&A for other stuff.
You do that. You do that.
All right, I'll let you take a breath and think about what's next. We've got a whole bunch of questions, at least 20. So look at the time and think about how long your answers are going to be. So for the folks with us today, I want to invite you to subscribe to Fresh Energy's podcast, Decarbonize, the Clean Energy Podcast. I'll probably take out the audio for this, put it up on the podcast. We'll also put it on YouTube and send you an email tomorrow morning. But there's lots of stuff on the podcast, including the most recent episode about the state of coal in Minnesota, which was actually a pretty fun conversation. So granted, it's a little sparse right now, but I'd also invite you to check out the events section of our website, fresh-energy.org. There's a button in the upper left corner for events. We do a lot of stuff with Yuka, and as we head into the spring and like Earth Day and summer and all that good stuff, there will be a lot coming. And then at some point, I'll drop the link to that electrification resource that Yuka mentioned into the chat, fresh-energy.org/go-electric, where we have lists of lawnmowers and snowblowers and weed whackers, and we talk about induction cooking. It's really all things electric. And of course, if you're already on the website, you can learn more about Fresh Energy and our work, and even make a year-end donation to support the work that we're doing to drive bold policy solutions to achieve equitable and carbon neutral economies right here in Minnesota and in the Midwest. Okay. I think we can do the Q&A now, Yuka.
All right. Do you want me to go to the next slide here, or keep the other one here? Which way do you want
I think you can stop sharing, and then it'll just be our faces.
Oh.
Yeah, that's my sister, so it's kind of like me, but.
All right, I'll stop sharing. How about that?
Okay. All right, there we go. Cool. So lots of awesome questions. I'm going to prioritize the ones that we didn't really touch on during the conversation, but perhaps we'll get to some of those too. So Kyle says, vehicle availability coupled with makers pushing what appear to be luxury models is limiting his wantingness to jump into getting an EV, and he doesn't really consider them affordable. Since there really aren't economy models out there, what can we do to just get more EVs here in the US and Minnesota? And I think like affordability is, kind of the main thing here.
Yeah, right now where we have seen the whole automotive market going right now is because there's a shortage of vehicles. The prices have just kept creeping up. Just a couple of years ago, average, well, I remember still a few years ago, the average price for new vehicle, light duty vehicle in the US was 32,000. A couple of years ago, it was 35,000. Now, this year, it's over 40,000. I think it's 42,000 right now. So the prices have gone up because if the manufacturers have shortage of equipment, they're going to be putting the equipment into the most expensive models so that they can get the highest margins. And when there's a shortage of vehicles, then that means that they are just keep on doing that. So that's a challenging thing here right now. And I think that we will be, maybe this is a little bit of a shift so that the new vehicle pricing will actually be higher now and in the future. Just kind of like keep that in mind, because the other thing that manufacturers have also done, that they have also dropped the cheapest models of the market. All the manufacturers on the internal combustion engine lines, it's hard to find anything below 20,000 anymore. So that has also changed. So maybe the new car prices will continue to be a little bit higher, but at the same time, then hopefully we'll see more used cars in the market. And I think that's where we're driving, is that if you want to have an affordable EV, the used car market might be the way to go. Of course, this works better in Europe because they have more sales there, so you see more used ones. But in here, it'll take a little bit longer time, but that's where it's going. At the same time, Nissan, for example, has dropped their pricing for their Leaf so that it's 27.4, and after tax credit, that effectively is less than 20,000. So that starts to be pretty affordable. No problem with that. Hyundai just announced their EV6, that is really good car for less than their Kona pricing. I think they started around 40,000. That's still quite a bit of money, but boy, that's a capable car, including that vehicle to load functionalities that you can't see anywhere else. So that's my take right now on the market.
Okay, thanks, Jukka. So
that was
now,
not very short, sorry.
It was not very short. No, and now that I've let you speculate on pricing, I think we're going to do a nuts and bolts question. And I will say, I think we will have an EV owners like webinar panel discussion probably in the next couple months, which is a great question, great way to talk to people just like you who are driving EVs and have gotten used to them. But okay, nuts and bolts questions. This is like a 5-parter from Kyle. We'll see if we get through them all. Is EV all-wheel drive equivalent to ICE all-wheel drive?
No, it's better. Next.
How much does range decrease in winter?
It used to decrease almost 50%. Nowadays, I would say 20 to 30. Because of the bigger batteries.
Okay. Can you charge on a driveway in the middle of January, and is it slower?
Yes, you can. Not necessarily. Is definitely still can charge the battery full in the middle of January too.
Do you need to store an EV in a warm space to ensure full battery life?
No, it doesn't have any impact on the battery life. EVs are great winter cars, and you can store them whichever way you want. Just plug them in when you can.
All right, and last one. How much will a rooftop box on an Xover style BEV decrease the range?
Quite a bit. They are aerodynamically pretty horrible. So it's not the best way to move your stuff. So it's much better if you can fill the stuff in your car. Totally depends on how fast you're going and what kind of a rooftop box you have and so forth. So it's hard to tell, but I would say it's not very economical.
Okay, well, speaking of BEVs, David asks, how can I find which BEVs will be available in Minnesota during 2022? Many, if not most, are only going to ZEV states.
That's true. The slide that I had there that I think are mostly available is probably gives you best information about it. And of course, our EV info list will list the ones that are most likely available in Minnesota right now. But again, that depends on the availability. So it is really hard to say.
All right, I've got one that I think you're going to enjoy from Greg. Rural car dealerships are usually either Ford, Dodge Ram, or Chevy. And is there any chance for a farmer to buy a reliable HEV pickup in the next year or two from any of these three automakers? And I'm thinking of a specific dealership too. You might want to talk about.
Well, yeah, Ford definitely, and then go up north, go all the way up north. So Paul Blomqvist from Roseau County Ford is your place to go from the Ford. At the same time, some of the other dealers are starting to see the light, which is good too. I just visited the Duluth dealers, which not necessarily rural, but they are getting there. And they 4 years ago they were like, I don't know about these EVs, whatever. And then we spoke with them a couple of months ago, and they all were like, yeah, these are really selling well. We had a couple of these, and they went right away. I'm just wondering how we can get more. So it totally has changed, but they have to start to sell some, and then they get the idea.
Got it. Okay. Well, Kyle asks, how affordable can we expect EVs to get once they flood the market? And I know you speculated a little bit about this, but he's assuming no tax incentives. So for example, in Europe, where there are many more EVs, what is the affordability like there?
First of all, it looks like they are at least the same price or lower. Where will the question is then tied to what will be the general pricing of all cars. As I said, if that starts to creep up, the same happens to EVs. But I would say compared to the internal combustion engine vehicles, they are the same, and they will start to become a little cheaper soon.
Okay. Well, Catherine, so you talked about crossovers, and I think Catherine's question gets to that. Do you have a recommendation for the most economical SUV EV based on federal rebates? And I know that's kind of a moving target.
Oh, talking about the federal rebates. Right now, Volkswagen ID.4 is the best value for money. They are right now available in rear-wheel drive for very good pricing, and next year they will be also available in all-wheel drive. So, and we are kind of moving away from, moving more into European style buying because of the shortage of the vehicles. So in Europe, here we are used to okay, you just go to the dealership and buy whatever they have on the lot, and that's that. In Europe, what they have done is they go to the dealership, they test drive the car if available, and then they go online and then they just look at, okay, I want this and this color, I want this and this equipment, and that, and then they order it. And then it comes in a month, and everybody's happy because they get exactly the right kind of car for them. And we've seen much more of that happening recently, and I think that's not a bad way to go. So even if I know people who have not even test driven their cars, they have just looked at the online reviews, what people say about the cars, and then they have just looked at, okay, what do we want from our car, and then ordered it and have been really, really happy with their choices.
Well, and I'm going to ask you Ken's question next too, speaking of makes and models, because I know you addressed this at a recent staff meeting. He's wondering if there's any word on a minivan coming to market.
Okay, so this was the thing that I was supposed to say for this portion. Okay, so right now we have the Chrysler Pacifica hybrid that is actually plug-in hybrid. That has been in the market for several years. So I would say that's probably a tested technology at this point. I know many owners who like it. It gets about 30 miles of range with EV, and after that 32 miles per gallon in hybrid mode. Then the model that I'm not so excited about telling right now is the Volkswagen Bus that we talked about before. Why I'm not excited? It'll be awesome car when it comes, but the challenge is that Volkswagen has been telling for years that it's coming, someday it's coming, and people are like really excited about it, but still it's a little bit away. So it's not coming next year. It's coming 2023, hopefully. So next year we'll talk more about it during our update.
Are you accusing Volkswagen of partaking in clickbait on the internet?
Maybe they have done a little bit of that with that model.
Maybe a little bit.
Just a slightly.
Well, now I kind of want to talk about the role utilities play in adoption and accessibility. So Bill asks, when will non-IOU customers, for the folks on the call, IOU is investor-owned utilities. So those are the big dogs. That's like Xcel and Minnesota Power, Otter Tail, some of the big guys in Minnesota. So when will non-IOU customers, so that's like customers of co-ops, start getting the deals that the IOU customers get? Because I know Excel does an awful lot to incentivize. Yuka? I know the utilities have a soft spot for you. So
yeah. I mean, utilities are doing pretty darn good job in many of these areas, and they will continue to do that. That has been really great to see. And a funny thing is that actually many of the non-IOUs are even providing better incentives than, for example, some of the IOUs are doing. So I would not count co-ops and munis out of that picture, because they are more flexible. They can actually decide what they want to do and how they want to incentivize it. So, for example, many of the Great River Energy members, like Connexus and Dakota Electric and Wright Hennepin and others, they've been providing excellent programs where you have had really good incentives for charging infrastructure installations. So I think they're not much behind in many of them. Of course, there's smaller utilities that don't have the same resources, but still they try to do their best, many of them.
Well, and I know we say this every time on our EV owner panel discussions, but your EV or your utilities need to hear from you. So if you call your co-op and tell them that you want benefits and incentives, they'll just put one more little check in the box, and it'll be a good opportunity for them to hear from customers.
Yeah, I would say always engage your utilities if you can. Have discussions with them. In most of the cases, they are probably able to help you. In some of the cases, you will be educating them, and that's not a bad idea either.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about Ford. Timothy is asking, he says, it looks like Ford is growing market share faster than Tesla. They also have more ability to scale up production. Is that correct?
They have opportunity in this market, and I would have to give Ford some credit. They have done actually a good job with it. They have been doing good job, and they seem to be doing more work. I would say, for example, interesting thing is of course the F-150 Lightning, but then they are bringing their vans into the market, transit vans in electric form. That's going to be very, very good. I'm a little disappointed with GM, how they have been talking a lot, but they haven't done as much as for example, Ford has. So if I would have to bet on someone, I would say Ford is really doing excellent job. So better than GM right now. I hope that we will see a huge jump in GM's actions in near future. That would be great. So far, they have been talking more than doing.
Okay. Well, David is asking a logistics question. So I know Minnesota is a clean car state now. More EVs will be coming to market here.
Mm-hmm.
But David is asking, what do you think about flying to a coast to buy a model not offered here in terms of maintenance and support once you get back here in Minnesota?
Yeah, many people have actually done that. I haven't heard any horror stories from that approach. But of course, it could be a little challenging if the local dealers wouldn't support it. I would definitely check first for the local dealers, and many of them really want to support these. They are getting there, and some of them can easily do that. So I would take an example, Kia EV6 or Hyundai Ioniq 5. Those are the models that are necessarily not going to be available in our market, at least in the beginning. And you might say, oh boy, I really love those. And I understand that totally. There are some dealers who are already supporting Kia Niros and Hyundai Ioniqs and others. So you could talk to them and say, all right, if I get one of these, if you can't, first you can ask, can you get me one? And most likely they say, sorry, there's no way. But if they can't, then you can ask them, well, could you potentially service it? And some of them have already mechanics that are trained. So there's a possibility for that. So just chat with your local dealers and see what kind of support they can provide.
All right, thank you. So Ross asks, has Tesla started to manufacture their own batteries in-house? And I know this was a discussion point a while back. Do you know if they began?
Yeah, they have been manufacturing their batteries with their production partners like Panasonic and nowadays CATL and other manufacturers. So yes, I would say they have. They have done that for a long time. Maybe they don't manufacture the cell itself. Maybe that comes from their partner, but they are as deep into the battery technology as you can ever be. So it's very, very interesting. And they have been also leading some of the latest production moves, one of them being building the cells directly to the frame there rather than using a separate enclosures for them, going into that direction, and also moving into LFPs. So you will have a cobalt-free batteries. Then they are moving very quickly into that in the shorter range vehicles, which is a very smart move, and many other manufacturers are now following it. So oftentimes we see many of the innovations coming from Tesla. I hope, and other manufacturers have been following. I hope that flips around soon, and other manufacturers are going to be doing more and bringing more new things into the market.
Okay. Well, I just got a text from Justin because I think before he left, he saw that people had some questions about where the federal dollars were going to go as far as charging goes. And he says the easy answer, because I'm not the expert in this, the easy answer is we don't fully know yet because we're waiting for specific guidance from the feds. But he anticipates that it will be pretty permissive, like level 2 and fast charging, both allowable. So it'll probably, when it comes, be pretty broad and all encompassing. Yuka, do you have anything to add?
I would say that right now, when we think about the infrastructure side of things, they're actually doing an excellent job. I was just today looking at how they are approaching this, and right now they have a request for information out there. So all the entities that are working in this space can now provide information, for example, what kind of charging stations are available, how much they can produce of those, how many big portion of those are made in the US, and some of the other details. And based on that, they can start to look at what's actually available, how can this happen in next 9 years. The other thing that they are asking from general public and other stakeholders is, what would you like to see happening? Where would you like us to put that money into? And when they get that feedback, then they put those two together and start to figure out how to share the money between different entities and what makes most sense. So I'm actually very pleased in seeing how they are approaching this.
Okay, well, let's talk about tax credits again. Timothy is asking, doesn't a base Nissan Leaf sell for $27,000 to $28,000 and gets you a $7,500 tax credit? Is that still the case?
Yes, right now the base Nissan Leaf 27.4, and then you get 7,500 tax credit for it. So
Okay.
That's exactly right.
Okay. So David says he is committed to purchasing a BEV that can tow a light trailer in 2022. Is he rushing into this? Should he wait? Oh, I suppose you have this on your spreadsheet, don't you?
Yeah, I don't remember towing capacities on top of my head, but I can tell you that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Where's the second part of my spreadsheet?
We can safely say more than 10.
More than 10, yes, definitely more than a dozen of those can do that. Some of them can tow. Most of those numbers are between 2,000 to 5,500 pounds. So yeah, there start to be some options for that.
Okay. All right, Kathy is asking whether or not EVs need snow tires. Does it really depend on the make and model? Is it something that folks should be investing in?
Well, it's all the cars function much better if you put snow tires on them. That's for every car.
So it's the guy from Finland, right? You would know?
Yep. Well, in Finland, you have to have snow tires on every winter. So that's how the things work there. But even here, even though we don't have as long of a slippery conditions here in Minnesota, so this is easy winters, by the way, for those who are wondering from driving wise, Minnesota winters are easy compared to Finland. The difference between here and Finland is that in Finland you don't see sun in the winter time, and therefore it never clears the roads. They usually stay pretty slippery all the time. Anyways, I would recommend always putting snow tires on any car you have, and that of course applies to EVs too. So it's always a good choice.
Okay, great. So Glenn is asking, how fast does this DC fast charger charge a vehicle? Is it necessary to always fully charge an EV, or are these public stations meant to just give partial charge?
For DC fast charging, usually the best way to charge with those is to not go above 80% of charge, because after 80%, the batteries start to charge slower at that point. And we are right now, most of the stops would be between 20 to 40 minutes for those that have over 100 kilowatt power levels. Some of the older ones and the slower charging cars could take an hour or more. So those ones I would not necessarily recommend doing coast-to-coast trips, because then you would be using the charging stations too long and it would become slower. But nowadays the new ones, like give you an example, Kia EV6 and Hyundai Ioniq 5, they seem to have a pretty long time that they are over 200 kilowatt levels. So then we are talking about many of these stops taking less than half an hour for you to go. And depends, of course, how you're driving. Like I drove a Volkswagen ID3 in Finland, and I was driving about 250 miles to my home place there, our home farm, in summertime, and that car had about 200 miles of range. So actually, I just stopped there for 8 minutes at the last portion of my drive, and then continued from there. Took a quick stop there, and continued, because I didn't need more than 8 minutes worth of charging. I could charge at the end as long as I wanted, so that was not an issue. So it doesn't necessarily mean always that you want to try to charge as much as you can.
Okay, well, speaking of charging, Michael asks if Tesla owners get free charging at Tesla stations.
They used to, based on if you bought one that had unlimited charging. Nowadays, not so much. You will be paying the same way as anyone else. Tesla usually prices their charging so that it's a little bit more than the traditional electricity is. Well, a little bit, maybe double. So it's not as cheap as it is at home, but it's not really expensive. But they have a luxury of having a lot of DC fast chargers. They have people who are using it all the time, so they can do it. The challenge right now we still have with the DC fast charging is that it doesn't make much business sense for the station owners. So that's why they have to keep the prices pretty high. So don't be surprised when people ask me about DC fast charging, is like, okay, what does it cost me to drive long distances? I usually say that it is pretty much the same price as you would be paying for your traditional internal combustion engine car when you drive long distances. There's not much difference in the price-wise right now, because DC fast charging, unfortunately, is much more expensive. The biggest savings with EVs come at home, where the charging is so much cheaper than driving with gas. Sure. And again, majority of the charging happens at home, so that's why it's much cheaper to drive EV.
Okay. Well, Matthew asks a question. What have you heard about progress with the Chevy Bolt battery pack replacement?
I've heard that there's good progress happening right now. We just had a Minnesota EV owners meeting last night, where there were many Bolt owners who were sharing that one of them actually had just taken their car to the dealership to have that work done. The other one said that they had it already done last month. So this is moving forward. People are getting their new batteries, and some of them are actually really happy because they might have driven 60,000 miles with their battery, and it had a shorter range before. Now they actually get the bigger battery and new battery for it, so they're not too sad about it when that happens. But of course, it's understandable. It's a little frustrating to wait for that, but when it happens, people have been really happy.
Okay. Well, Tammy was struck by your slide of EV sales in the US versus Europe. So she asks, do you think US attitudes toward EVs are as mature and accepting as in Europe? Tammy says, personally, I think European attitudes and practices are ahead of the US, but what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, in Europe and US, there was a first early majority that was like almost 30% of the people who are like, yeah, I'm interested in EVs. I would consider one if I could get a test drive and do that. And that was very similar in Europe and US. The difference here again is that in Europe, they made sure that the manufacturers actually started providing cars, and then that could start to happen. In here, we don't have that. We don't have enough models. So I don't have any worries about US consumers' attitudes, because you can say maybe 50 or 40% is saying I will never buy an EV. Well, that's fine with me. I don't care. If 20% of the people start driving electric, rest will follow. There's no question about it. That's how the things work, because it's just better technology. So I'm not concerned about it at all. We just need to get the cars here.
All right, well, I've got a very specific question from Steven. So Steven says, and maybe you've heard of this program, but Plymouth, Minnesota is installing 115 EV chargers at city buildings and parks, and will charge 20 to 25 cents per kilowatt hour for L2 and higher for DCFC. They are projecting 20% usage rate. What are your thoughts on that program?
I have not looked into detail of that program, and I think it's a third-party run program. So when they put the charging stations in there, they are expecting to at least cover their cost and maybe make a little margin. So pricing-wise, 20 to 25 cents doesn't sound too bad. It's more than what you pay at home, but it's not outrageously expensive in that way. So if they can keep that, that wouldn't be too bad. What I usually say about public charging is that for pricing-wise on public charging, I say always make sure that it's more expensive to charge in public places than it is at home, because that way we make sure that those who have home charging will actually be charging home and not go to public charging, and the public charging will be available for those who might not be able to use the home charging for their trip or whatever reason. That way we make sure that the availability is best and the system works. If you make the charging too cheap on public, then everybody starts to use it there, and then those who really need it might not be able to use it.
Thanks, Jukka. That's actually, I hadn't heard that argument, but now that you say it, it makes perfect sense.
I haven't said that before. Okay.
I don't, not around me, you know, perhaps it's
Okay,
an EV owners
we have
discussion.
to do more of these webinars clearly. So
I don't know. I think I'm going to struggle to get on your calendar. We've got a pretty busy 2022 coming up. Well, David has a question for you, and I think it's kind of a technical one. So what do you think about the 800 volt architecture versus 400 volt architecture? If you had two vehicles equal in other ways, would you choose the 400 volt or the 800 volt?
In technical wise, if we think about from the manufacturer standpoint, I say everybody should go to 800 volts as soon as possible, because that enables faster DC fast charging speeds for the cars. That's good. For you as a buyer, then the question is, how much will you be using DC fast charging? If you're just going to be using in metro area mostly and your everyday errands and stuff like that, and you hardly ever will use DC fast charging, it doesn't make that big of a difference. But if you decide that, hey, this is something I'll use all the time for long distance trips and something like that, 800 volts is the way to go. So that's totally depending on the use case. But like my wife, she has driven 9 years with electric cars, and she has never used a public charging station. So for her, 400 or 800 volts, no difference. But again, this is totally dependent on the use case.
Okay. Well, Roger asks, why are EV manufacturers seeming so slow to adopt plug and charge on new models?
A new technology, they haven't been testing it yet too much, but it should be interesting. It will add an extra layer to the system. So there will be first hiccups in the system quite a bit. I'm sure it won't be just everybody will be working like in movies. I don't think that will happen. But when they start to do it, and more they do it, more they learn, more they are able to make the standardization work for everyone the same way, then we'll start to see it more. But it just hasn't been high enough on their priority list. They have been working on so many different things, then this is kind of like next thing. Okay, now we have crossed all of these other things on the list. Now we can go on the plug and charge side of things.
All right, we are at 6:30, so I'm going to do one more question because I know you have
I think you can close by encouraging people to just buy an EV if they want an EV, but that's my assumption. So
Yep.
David asks, what do you think about the advisability of buying the Leaf Plus with the older battery technology versus waiting for is it the Aria or similar?
Aria is the next one that coming out.
And I know you're
I
very
would-
pro, like if you just get one now, sell it later, I mean, at least that's what I
true.
remember.
Yeah. I mean, I love Leaf myself. I like it a lot. The Plus is extremely good car. When you drive it, I think it has the power and it has the range. So I like it a lot. And one option is that you don't necessarily have to buy it. You can lease it. You can always choose the leasing option. There are some really good leasing deals usually available. So you can lease it, use it for 3 years, and then decide if you want to buy it at that point or if you're just going to be dropping the keys and saying, hey, now I am going to buy that one. And then someone else will get that as a used vehicle and be able to buy it. So leasing is not a bad idea. Consider that, check out that and do the math. But I personally leased 2 Leafs myself. Both times, excellent choices.
Well, perfect. What a great note to end on. Well, thank you for listening to the audio recording of our webinar. You can stay up to date on Fresh Energy's work at fresh-energy.org or follow us on social media. Thank you to everyone listening for subscribing to our podcast, and you can support Fresh Energy's work by making an end-of-the-year donation today. Visit our website at fresh-energy.org and click Donate in the upper right corner. Thank you for listening.